It started with the sound of my own name echoing through the kitchen. "Ben!" Emily's voice was sharp, trembling, like something terrible had happened. I was making coffee, same as every morning, the smell of it heavy in the air. When I turned around, she was standing there in her robe, clutching the phone with both hands. Her face was pale, her eyes wide. For a moment I thought maybe one of the kids was hurt. Then I saw the look in her eyes. Not fear, coldness. The sirens came next, loud, urgent, cutting through the calm of our quiet street. I stepped toward the window and saw the flashing blue and red lights reflecting on the porch. 2 police cars, the sound of gravel crunching under boots. My heart sank. Emily didn't meet my eyes when I asked what was happening. She just whispered, "I'm sorry, Ben." Before I could move, the front door burst open. "Benjamin Carter, you're under arrest." Detective Carl Morrison's voice filled the room like thunder. I tried to speak, but he was already turning me around, his hands rough as he pulled my arms behind my back. The cuffs bit into my wrists. Nathan was standing halfway down the stairs, his hair a mess, his face pale. "Dad?" he called, his voice shaking. Emily pulled him back, saying something I couldn't hear. Linda was crying in the hallway. I turned my head toward them, desperate to explain, but Morrison pushed me toward the door. Neighbors stood outside, watching. Mrs. Duffy from across the street whispered to her husband. I knew something was off with that man. I wanted to shout that they were wrong, that I hadn't done anything, but my words died in my throat. The only sound was the police radio crackling beside me. As they shoved me into the back seat of the cruiser, I saw Nathan again, pressed against the window, tears streaking down his face. "Dad didn't do anything," he shouted. His voice followed me down the driveway, fading as the car pulled away. And in that moment I didn't know how to tell him he was right, that I had no idea what was happening. Detective Morrison went back into the house for a moment, then returned holding a brown folder. "Found what we needed," he said. He tossed it into the seat beside me. Inside were printed bank statements, transfers, wire payments, my signature on every line. Only they weren't mine. The signatures looked like mine. The handwriting was mine, but I'd never seen those papers before. Morrison grinned. "You've been busy," he said. I stared at the documents, confused, sick to my stomach. "That's not me," I told him. "That's not my account." He didn't bother to answer. Through the window I saw Patrick Green, Emily's lawyer, standing by the mailbox in his perfect suit. He nodded to Emily, the kind of small nod that meant something was finished. My throat went dry. Everything made sense in a single blinding flash. The late nights, the phone calls, the arguments that came out of nowhere. She'd planned this. As the cruiser began to move, I caught a glimpse of Linda in the living room window. Her small hand was pressed against the glass, her lips trembling. I tried to smile for her, but my face wouldn't move. Then the house disappeared behind us. The house I'd built with my own hands, gone like it had never been mine at all. In the car, Morrison's partner, a younger officer named Keller, looked at me in the rear-view mirror. "You know why you're really here, right?" he asked. I didn't answer. My voice was gone. "Assault and battery," he said. "On your wife," I blinked. "As what?" "She's got photos," he said. "Medical records. Says you hit her more than once." I couldn't breathe. My body went cold. "I never touched her," I whispered. Morrison let out a dry laugh. "They all say that." Outside the window, Raleigh blurred past, trees, shops, people going about their mornings like nothing in the world was wrong. I thought about the first time Emily and I had walked those same streets, holding hands, dreaming about building a life together. Now that life was ending, and she was the one holding the match. By the time we reached the station, the cuffs had cut into my wrists. The door opened, and Morrison pulled me out roughly. "You can start thinking about your lawyer," he said. "Though it won't help much. Inside the building, everything smelled like bleach and fear. The walls were gray, the lights too bright. They sat me down in an interrogation room, cold metal chair against cold concrete. For a moment I saw my reflection in the one-way mirror, a man I barely recognized. Somewhere down the hall, a phone rang. Papers shuffled. Someone laughed. The world went on as if my life hadn't just been taken apart. I leaned forward, staring at my hands, and heard her voice again in my head. "I'm sorry, Ben." It played over and over, softer each time, until it didn't sound like an apology anymore. It sounded like a goodbye. Before everything went wrong, my life was ordinary, and I used to think that was a blessing. I'd wake before sunrise, pack a lunch, kiss Emily on the forehead, and drive my old Ford pickup to whatever construction site needed me that day. The radio always played classic country, the kind my father used to whistle when he worked the yard. The smell of coffee on the passenger seat, sawdust clinging to my clothes, a warm North Carolina morning, that was my world. I met Emily when I was 24, inside a hardware store. She was in the paint aisle, holding up color samples against the light. She had this soft voice, this way of looking at you that made you forget where you were. We talked for half an hour about wood finishes and paint tones, though I think we both knew we were talking about something else entirely. We married a year later. In the early years, everything we touched felt golden. We built our first home together, small but ours. I started my own company, Carter Builders, and she helped design the interiors. Nathan was born 2 years after, then little Linda 3 years later. The house was full of noise, toys, laughter, late-night arguments about nothing that ended in laughter again. Emily loved to host Sunday dinners, her mother's recipes filling the kitchen with smells of rosemary and butter. I remember thinking, this is it. This is what happiness looks like. But happiness has a way of fading quietly. I didn't notice it at first. The long silences, the nights she said she was too tired to talk. She started staying up later, working on her laptop. She said she was taking on more clients for her design work, but I never saw the designs. I was too busy building houses to see the cracks forming in my own. One night I came home late from a job in Durham. The lights were off except for one in the living room. Emily was sitting on the couch, dressed up, makeup still perfect. She said she'd been out meeting a client. I nodded, pretending to believe her, though she smelled faintly of cologne that wasn't mine. The next morning I found a strange charge in our joint account. $1,000 wired to something labeled Green Consulting. I thought it was a business expense she'd made, but when I asked, she just said, "It's for financial planning." The name meant nothing to me then. I didn't know Patrick Green would soon become the man who helped destroy my life. Weeks passed. Emily's distance grew wider, but she smiled more. That fake, polished smile she'd use for strangers. She started dressing differently, sharper, like someone who wanted to impress the world. I thought maybe she was just finding herself again. God, I was naive. One evening she came into the kitchen while I was fixing a broken chair. She said, "Ben, you ever think about what would happen if we weren't together?" She said it casually, as if she were asking about the weather. I laughed, thinking she was joking. She didn't laugh back. I should have known then. She began spending weekends away with clients. When I asked to join her, she'd say it was professional. I noticed she'd start taking phone calls outside, whispering near the porch, always glancing back to make sure I wasn't listening. Once I caught her staring at me across the table, with this strange mix of guilt and determination, like she'd already decided something she couldn't undo. I remember one night in particular. Rain hammered against the windows. I woke up and found her downstairs in the dark, the blue light of her laptop painting her face. She was whispering into her phone. Her voice was low, steady. I couldn't hear everything, but I heard enough. "Yes," she said. "He still trusts me." "No, he doesn't suspect a thing." My heart stopped. Then came a man's voice, muffled but familiar. "Patrick." He was saying something about paperwork and timing. Emily nodded, her tone colder than I'd ever heard. "I'll handle it," she said. "Just make sure Morrison's ready." I didn't know who Morrison was. I didn't know that name would be the one leading me away in handcuffs a few months later. I stood there in the hallway, frozen. I wanted to confront her, but I couldn't. I went back upstairs, lay in bed, and stared at the ceiling until dawn. She came to bed an hour later, smelling like rain and perfume, kissed my cheek and whispered, "You've been working too hard." I told myself it was nothing. That love makes people tired, that we'd find our way back. But when you're standing on the edge of a cliff, the wind feels the same as peace, right before you fall. The last normal morning I ever had was a week later. Emily was laughing at the kitchen table, helping Linda with her homework, while Nathan was talking about his baseball game. The smell of pancakes filled the air. It should have been perfect. I didn't know that in a drawer upstairs, she was already hiding the documents that would send me to prison. I used to think betrayal was loud, the sound of doors slamming, voices shouting, something breaking. But when Emily betrayed me, it was quiet, clean, precise, like a surgeon's cut you don't even feel until you see the blood. It began with the papers. Not the divorce ones, those came later. These were business documents, things I didn't remember signing. One afternoon I came home from work early to grab some tools. Emily was in the study, startled when she saw me. She closed her laptop so fast it made a sharp clap. I asked, "What was that?" She smiled too wide. "Invoices," she said. "I'm helping you organize the business accounts." It should have made me happy. She was taking an interest in my work again. But something in her tone made my stomach tighten. I stepped closer, and for a second I saw the reflection of her screen in the glass of a picture frame on the wall. My name was on it, my signature, but the document wasn't one of mine. Before I could say anything, she stood and kissed me. "You smell like sawdust," she said softly. "Go wash up, dinner's almost ready." I did what she wanted. I always did. That night, while she showered, I turned on her laptop. It was password protected now. It had never been before. I closed it, telling myself it was fine, that every couple needs privacy. But deep down I knew the ground was shifting under my feet. A week later, Patrick Green came over again. He greeted me like an old friend. "Ben, you've got a hell of a reputation around town," he said. "Emily tells me your business is expanding fast." I nodded slowly. "Yeah, I guess it's going well." He smiled like a man who already knew the punchline. "That's good to hear, because we're putting your name on some new properties, just to keep things legally tidy." I frowned. "Properties?" He waved it off. "Paperwork, that's all," Emily chimed in. "Patrick's helping us secure our assets in case anything ever happens. It's for the kids, Ben." I didn't understand a word of it, but I signed the papers she handed me. My wife, my partner, the mother of my children. Why wouldn't I? A few days later, my bank called. The manager, an old friend, sounded cautious. "Ben, just checking. Did you authorize a new account in Florida under Carter Enterprises?" I laughed. "Florida? No, must be a mix-up." He hesitated. "The signatures match your file." I hung up with a knot in my chest. That night I confronted Emily. "Did you open another account in my name?" She didn't even look surprised. "Don't be ridiculous," she said. "You must have misunderstood. Everything's under control." Then she turned away, her tone softening. "You're exhausted, Ben. You need to stop worrying so much." That was her trick. She always turned my doubt into guilt. I remember sitting in the living room after she went to bed, staring at the photos on the mantel. The four of us smiling on vacation, Nathan with his baseball glove, Linda with ice cream smeared on her chin. I wanted to protect them. I thought staying calm, staying patient was the way to do it, but the trap had already been set. A few weeks later, I noticed strange looks from my clients. One man, Mr. Hanson, pulled me aside. "Hey, Ben, I'm sorry about the lawsuit," he said. I froze. "What lawsuit?" He looked confused. "Your wife didn't tell you? Something about unpaid materials?" I went home that night to find Emily in the kitchen, wine glass in hand. "What's going on, Emily?" I asked. She sighed, like I was the one exhausting her. "That's nothing, Ben, just paperwork I'm sorting out. Go take a shower." I didn't move. "Did you file something against me?" She smiled faintly. "Why would I do that?" Her eyes didn't match her voice. I remember feeling dizzy, like the walls were tilting. She put down her glass and walked past me, touching my arm. "You don't trust me anymore, do you?" And that's the thing, I did, even when I shouldn't have. The next morning, 2 officers came by to ask a few questions about some financial inconsistencies. They were polite, professional, but the way they looked at me said everything. Someone had told them I'd been moving money around, creating shell companies, hiding assets. I remember sitting at the dining table, staring at the same wood grain I'd polished with my own hands years earlier, and realizing my life was no longer mine. Every piece of it, my business, my home, even my children, was being pulled away one lie at a time. Emily came in as the officers left. "What did they want?" she asked, her tone calm, almost curious. "They think I've been stealing," I said quietly. She tilted her head like she was thinking it over. "Well," she said after a moment, "you've been so distracted lately. Maybe you made a mistake somewhere." I looked at her for a long time, the woman I'd loved for half my life. And for the first time, I saw what she really was, not broken, not lost, but deliberate, careful, ruthless. That night, I dreamed of standing in quicksand, sinking slow, unable to move while she watched from the shore. And when I woke, the feeling didn't fade. It was already too late. The courthouse smelled like disinfectant and cold coffee. I remember that smell better than anything else. It clung to my clothes, to my hands, even to my thoughts. The day I walked in, chained at the wrists, I still believed in fairness. I thought if I just told the truth, everything would sort itself out. Looking back now, I can't decide if that was faith or stupidity. Emily was already seated at the plaintiff's table when I entered. She wore a navy suit, her hair tied back neatly, a white blouse with a small gold pin near her collar. She looked perfect, too perfect. When our eyes met, she didn't flinch, not once. She just stared through me, as if I was some stranger whose life had nothing to do with hers. Patrick Green sat beside her, whispering into her ear with that smug calmness lawyers have when they already know the ending. Across the room, Judge Helen Barlow was stacking her papers, her expression as rigid as the wooden bench behind her. I'd heard she was tough on domestic violence cases. Maybe that's why Patrick made sure my case landed in her courtroom. My attorney, a tired public defender named Robert Ellison, leaned toward me. "Just keep your answers short," he said. "We'll try to poke holes in her timeline." His voice didn't carry much conviction. When the trial began, it was like watching someone else's life play out. Emily spoke first. Her voice trembled at the right moments, broke at others. "He hit me," she said. "He threatened to take the children." Every lie rolled off her tongue, smooth as silk. She showed the judge photographs, bruises on her arm, dark circles near her ribs. I had never seen those marks before in my life. Then came the financial evidence, forged bank records, company documents with my name on them. I tried to tell them it wasn't my handwriting, that I didn't even have access to those accounts. No one cared. The jury stared at me like I was an animal behind glass, a monster pretending to be calm. I saw Nathan sitting in the back with Martha, my sister. He looked smaller, thinner. His eyes were red. Linda wasn't there. I later found out Emily said it was too traumatic for her. When it was my turn to speak, I tried to stay steady. "I didn't do any of this," I said. "I never laid a hand on my wife." My voice cracked halfway through. "She's lying." Patrick rose smoothly, his voice dripping with false empathy. "Mr. Carter," he said, "you expect us to believe that your wife of 15 years suddenly decided to invent abuse, forge financial documents, and risk her own reputation? For what reason?" I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. Every reason I had sounded too small next to her tears. He turned to the jury. "Ladies and gentlemen, what you see here is not confusion. It's guilt." The gavel echoed like thunder when Judge Barlow called for silence. The courtroom blurred. I remember the dull roar of voices, the scrape of chairs, the faint smell of Emily's perfume, lilac and something sharp, metallic underneath. When the verdict came, it was quick: guilty, fraud, assault, probation denied. The sound of that word, and guilty, still feels heavier than the cuffs they put on me. Martha stood up in the back, shouting something I can't remember. Nathan didn't move. Emily lowered her head, her shoulders shaking like she was crying, but I swear I saw the corner of her mouth lift for half a second. As they led me away, I tried to catch my son's eye. "Nathan!" I called out. He didn't look at me. He just turned toward his mother. That hurt more than the sentence itself. Down in the holding room, my lawyer sat across from me, his tie loose, eyes tired. "I'm sorry, Ben," he said. "Without proof, there's nothing more I can do. You'll serve time in Raleigh Correctional. Maybe with good behavior, 10 years. 10 years, I repeated, for something I didn't do," he sighed. "It could have been 20. I laughed then, the kind of laugh that comes from somewhere deep and hollow." He looked uncomfortable. After a moment, he stood and left me there. That night in the county jail, I lay on a thin mattress staring at a ceiling that hummed with fluorescent light. Every sound echoed. Footsteps, metal doors clanging, the soft sobs of men who'd given up. I wasn't one of them yet, but I was close. I closed my eyes and thought of my children, Nathan's voice, Linda's laugh. I wondered what Emily had told them about me. Maybe she said I'd hurt her because I didn't love them enough. And maybe she said I was dangerous. Maybe she said nothing at all. When the lights went out, I prayed, not for freedom, but for understanding. I wanted to know how the woman who once promised to grow old with me could look at me in front of a judge and say I was a monster. The answer never came. Just silence, cold and endless. The first thing that hit me when I stepped off that prison bus was the sound, metal slamming, voices echoing through the yard, the low hum of men who'd already forgotten what silence felt like. The sun was burning hot over Raleigh Correctional, but everything about that place felt cold. Concrete and wire, fences high enough to scrape the sky. The guards lined us up like cattle. One of them, a thick-shouldered man with a scar across his chin, barked out, "Hands where I can see them. Eyes forward." His badge read R. Cole. I didn't know it then, but Officer Raymond Cole would become both my tormentor and, strangely, the only man inside those walls who ever treated me like I was still human. The intake process was humiliating. Strip down, shower, uniform number. They took my wedding ring, my belt, the last pieces of my old life. My name, Benjamin Carter, became 47291. That number would follow me for decades. My cell was a narrow box that smelled like bleach and sweat. 2 bunks, 1 toilet, 1 sink that coughed rust instead of water. My cellmate, a man named Curtis Hale, barely looked up when I entered. He was older, his hair grey, eyes tired. "Don't talk unless you have to," he said flatly. "And don't look at anyone too long." The first night was endless. Every noise sounded like a threat. Footsteps, laughter, shouting. Somewhere down the hall someone screamed. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, tracing the cracks in the paint. I thought about Emily, about Nathan and Linda, about the life I'd lost in a single day. I kept waiting to wake up. But morning came and I was still there. Days became weeks and time stopped having meaning. You learned to move slow, to keep your head down. Fights broke out in the cafeteria, in the yard, in the showers. I learned where not to sit, who not to talk to. Some men carried anger like a weapon. Others carried silence. So I carried confusion. Once during lunch, Cole stopped by my table. "Carter," he said, looking down at me, "are you one of those wife-beaters?" I met his eyes, shaking my head. "No." He studied me for a second, then laughed. "They all say that." He walked off, but there was something in his tone. Not cruelty exactly, more like tired disbelief. I wrote letters to my kids every week. Martha said she'd deliver them. She was the only one who still visited. "I know you didn't do it," she told me through the glass, her hand pressed against the barrier. "I can see it in your eyes." Her faith was the only thing keeping me from falling apart, but months turned into years. The letters I sent to Nathan and Linda came back unopened. Emily had changed their last names to hers, Green. I stared at one of those returned envelopes for hours, my own handwriting mocking me. Prison changes how you see time. It stretches it, then crushes it. Days crawl. Years vanish. After a while, the outside world feels like something you dreamed once but can't quite remember. Every night before lights out, I prayed for one thing, not for freedom, but for truth. For someone, anyone, to see through the lies that put me there. One winter morning, Reverend Thomas Grady came to the cell block. He was a tall, gentle man with soft eyes and a voice that seemed out of place among the shouting and clanging. "You holding up, Ben?" he asked. I nodded, though I wasn't. He handed me a worn Bible. "Even stone walls can't keep faith from finding you," he said. That Bible became my only possession that mattered. I read it cover to cover, not because I was holy, but because I needed words that didn't lie. Still, there were nights when anger burned too deep. I'd lie awake thinking of Emily, her voice on the stand, her tears, her lies. I wondered if she ever thought about me, if she ever felt even a drop of guilt. I doubted it. Then one evening, as I returned from work detail, I found a folded piece of paper on my bunk. No one admitted to leaving it. There was a clipping from a newspaper, a real estate ad. Emily Green, broker of the month. Her smile was the same one she used to give me. The house behind her in the photo was beautiful, big, white, with a garden that looked like something from a magazine. The caption beneath it read, "Luxury property purchased under husband's corporate assets." I stared at that photo until my hands shook. She'd built her new life with the ashes of mine. That night, Officer Cole walked by my cell. He saw the paper in my hands and paused. "You knew her?" he asked. I looked up at him, my voice rough. "She was my wife." He didn't say anything for a long time. Then he muttered almost to himself, "Damn, the world sure knows how to pick its favorites." And he walked away. That was the first time I realized something. I wasn't just serving a sentence. I was buried alive in someone else's story. Time in prison doesn't move and it rots. It sits heavy in your bones, spreads into your thoughts, and eats away at everything you were before the gates closed behind you. The years began to blur into each other, and the world outside turned into something I could no longer touch or even imagine. At first, Martha came to visit every month. She always brought news from home, and I clung to every word like it was oxygen. Nathan's doing well in school, she'd say. Linda's still painting. But as the months became years, her stories grew shorter. The pauses between her words grew longer. They're teenagers now, she told me once, her voice trembling. They're angry. Emily's told them things, Ben. Terrible things. I tried to smile, tried to tell her it was fine, but the truth was a knife in my chest. I sent letters every week, to the kids, to Emily, even though I knew she was throwing them away. I still wrote. Every word was a piece of me reaching through the bars, hoping one day it might touch something real again. Then the visit stopped. Martha wrote instead. So they don't want to see you anymore, Ben. Emily's remarried. I read that line over and over until the paper blurred from my tears. My ex-wife, the woman who'd stolen everything, now had a new husband. I wondered if it was Patrick. I didn't want to know. One day, months later, a letter came addressed in Nathan's handwriting. My hands shook so bad I almost tore it open. It was short. Just 2 sentences. Please stop writing. Mom says it's better this way. I don't hate you, but I don't want to be part of this anymore. I sat there in my cell staring at the words, the edges of the paper damp from my fingers. I didn't cry. I just folded it carefully and slid it between the pages of the Bible Reverend Grady had given me. Faith stayed there for the rest of my sentence. That night, Cole came by during lights out. He must have seen something in my face because he paused at my cell door. Bad news? He asked. I nodded. He grunted softly. Happens to most of us. The world forgets quick. He moved on, his keys rattling against the bars, but I didn't forget. Every sound, every face, every word Emily ever said to me. I remembered all of it. That was my curse. As the years went on, I became quieter. My cellmate Curtis was transferred, and a new kid took his place. Marcus, 22, in for armed robbery. He called me Old Man Ben. One night he asked what I was in for. When I told him, he frowned. You don't seem like the type. I laughed at that. That's what I said. Prison teaches you not to expect kindness, so when it comes it feels like a wound opening. Marcus started reading the Bible I kept by my bed. Sometimes we'd talk about our families, what we'd do if we ever got out. He wanted to start a car repair shop. I told him I just wanted to sit on my porch again, drink coffee and watch the sun rise without hearing the sound of chains. Then, one winter, a letter arrived from Martha. The handwriting was shaky, the ink uneven. I knew before I even opened it. She wrote, Ben, I'm sick. The doctors say it's cancer. I wanted you to know that I love you and I always believed you. I pressed the paper to my forehead and whispered her name until my throat burned. She was the only person who'd never given up on me. When the chaplain told me she'd passed, I didn't cry. I just sat on the edge of my bunk, staring at the floor until my legs went numb. Grief in prison isn't like grief outside. You can't scream, can't hold anyone, can't even visit a grave. You just swallow it whole and keep breathing. After Martha died, I stopped marking the days. The calendar on my wall stayed frozen in the same month. Men came and went. Guards changed shifts. New prisoners filled the cells, but I stayed the same. The world outside was a rumor, and I was fading from it like a photograph left in the sun. Years later, I heard from another inmate that Emily had moved to Virginia. She's doing well, he said, like he was delivering good news. Runs her own real estate firm now. I said nothing, but inside, something turned to stone. Sometimes at night, I'd close my eyes and try to picture Nathan and Linda, what they looked like now, how their voices might sound. But the harder I tried, the blurrier their faces became. That was the cruelest part of it all. You don't just lose people in prison. You lose the memories of them piece by piece, until even their laughter starts to sound like someone else's. When I looked in the mirror one morning, I saw gray in my hair, lines around my eyes I didn't remember earning. I realized I'd stopped being the man who'd been arrested. I was someone else now, quieter, harder, emptier. That's when I understood what punishment really meant. It wasn't the bars or the guards or the cold. It was losing everyone you loved one by one, until there was no one left to lose. After 20 years inside, I had become invisible, even to myself. The world outside had kept turning, but in here everything stood still. I no longer measured time by days or months, only by small changes, the way my reflection grew older in the cracked mirror, the way new guards replaced old ones, the way hope shrank until it fit neatly into silence. Prison has a way of stripping the meaning from everything. Holidays were just different meals. Birthdays were reminders that I'd missed another year with my kids, and nights were long stretches of thoughts I couldn't silence. The hardest part wasn't the noise. It was the quiet. The kind of quiet where memories start to talk to you. Sometimes, I'd replay moments from before it all fell apart. Emily's laugh, Linda's tiny hand wrapped around my finger, Nathan running across the yard with his baseball glove. Those memories had once been soft and warm. Now they were sharp. They cut. By then, even Reverend Grady's visits had grown less frequent. He'd aged too, his hair turning white, his steps slower. But when he came, he always smiled the same way. "Still holding on, Ben?" he'd ask. I'd nod, though I wasn't sure why anymore. Then one day, something changed. It was a young guard who came by my cell during mail call. Not Cole, who'd been transferred years earlier. This one was new, barely 30, clean-shaven, voice unsure. "Carter," he said, handing me an envelope. "You got mail." The handwriting was neat, unfamiliar. I tore it open and read, "Mr. Carter, my name is Detective Leah Ortiz. I've recently been reviewing old case files connected to financial fraud charges in Wake County. Some of the documentation in your file doesn't match the official records on file with the bank. I'd like to discuss this with you if you're willing. I must have read it 100 times before the words really landed. After all those years, someone was finally questioning the story that ruined my life." My hands were shaking so badly the paper crumpled. I pressed it flat against my knee and just stared at it, my heart pounding. When I told Reverend Grady, he looked up at me with cautious hope. "Maybe it's something," he said softly. "You just keep breathing, Ben. Sometimes that's all it takes for the truth to find you again." Weeks later, Detective Ortiz came in person. She was younger than I expected. Sharp eyes, calm voice, the kind of person who listened more than she spoke. She sat across from me in the visitation room, a stack of files in front of her. "I've reviewed your case," she said, flipping through the pages. "Some of the signatures and transaction logs, they don't align with the timestamps from your business accounts. Whoever set this up, they knew what they were doing." I swallowed hard. "Emily," I said quietly. "And Patrick Green," she looked up. "The attorney?" I nodded. They worked together. He was her lawyer during the divorce. I didn't see it at the time, but I trailed off. Ortiz leaned back, her expression thoughtful. "There's more," she said. "One of the witnesses who testified against you, Paul Jenkins. He's been trying to reach someone from the DA's office. He says he wants to clear his conscience." I felt dizzy. Paul had been my old business partner, the one who claimed I'd hidden money from him. His testimony was what sealed my conviction. "He lied," I said. "He lied to protect himself." "Maybe," she replied. "But he's willing to talk now." That night I couldn't sleep. For the first time in years, I felt something inside me that wasn't anger or grief. It was fragile, almost painful. But hope is dangerous in prison. It grows wild, and when it dies again, it leaves nothing but ashes. Still, I held on to it. I needed to. The next few months crawled by. Ortiz visited again and again, bringing small pieces of light into that dark place. She told me they were re-examining my case, comparing handwriting samples, questioning people from my trial. Every time she left, I sat on my bunk staring at the cell door, afraid that maybe I'd imagined her, that maybe the world outside had finally stopped caring. Then one morning, as I was sweeping the hallway, Marcus, the kid who'd once shared my cell, came running down the corridor with a folded newspaper. "Old man Ben," he said, breathless, "you're in here." He handed it to me, and there, on the front page of the local section, was a headline. "Raleigh Detective Reopens 1990s Fraud Case Amid Allegations of Fabricated Evidence." There was my name. Benjamin Carter. My story. I stared at it until my vision blurred. For years I'd been forgotten. My name had become nothing but a number. And now suddenly it was alive again, printed in black ink for everyone to see. That night I lay on my bunk and looked up at the ceiling. The same cracks, the same noise, the same walls, but something felt different. For the first time in decades, I didn't feel dead. For the first time, I was breathing again. The day they told me my case was officially reopened, I almost didn't believe it. After 21 years behind bars, you learn not to trust hope. Hope gets you hurt. But when the warden himself called me to the office and handed me a folded notice stamped with the seal of Wake County, I just stood there, staring at it. Petition for review. New evidence submitted. For a long moment I couldn't move. The paper trembled in my hands. Then the warden said, almost kindly, "Looks like somebody out there thinks you might be worth a second look, Carter." When I got back to my cell, Marcus was waiting. "What did they say, old man?" he asked, his eyes wide. I told him. His grin split his face. "About damn time." We both laughed. The kind of laugh that sounds rusty from lack of use. A week later, Detective Leah Ortiz came to see me again. She had a stack of files under her arm and a look on her face that mixed exhaustion and determination. We sat in the same cold visitation room with the humming lights overhead. "I've been through every document," she said. "Half the financial forms from your trial were never verified by the bank. They were photocopies, unsigned originals. It's sloppy work, but it's worse than that. The timestamps were forged. Someone changed the creation dates." I blinked. "You can prove that?" She nodded. "Digital forensics don't lie. The paper copies were printed weeks after you were arrested. And the handwriting, well, we compared it to your ex-wife's old business records. Let's just say the similarities are strong enough to raise eyebrows." For the first time in 2 decades, the air in that room felt lighter. My chest tightened, not with fear but with disbelief. "So you're saying—" "I'm saying," she interrupted gently, "someone framed you, and it's becoming harder and harder for anyone to deny it." I leaned back in my chair, my hands covering my face. My pulse was racing. After all those years of silence, finally someone was listening. "Detective," I said, my voice shaking, "why are you doing this? Why this case?" She hesitated before answering. "My father was accused of something he didn't do when I was a kid. It ruined him. I can't undo what happened to him, but maybe I can do right by someone else." For a long moment I couldn't speak. When I finally did, all I could whisper was, "Thank you." Weeks turned into months as she dug deeper. I wasn't allowed to see everything, but Reverend Grady came by one morning with a newspaper folded under his arm. "You're on the news again, Ben," he said, his voice gentle. "They're calling it the Carter investigation." He slid the paper across the table. There was my photo, younger, beardless, angry. The headline read, "New detective uncovers possible wrongful conviction in high-profile 1999 case." Underneath was a quote from Ortiz. "If evidence was fabricated, it is our duty to correct it, no matter how long it's been." For the first time, I felt like the world outside wasn't just watching, it was listening. Not everyone was happy about it. Cole, who'd returned to the prison as a supervisor years later, called me into his office. "You really think this changes anything?" he said. "People like her, they come in full of fire. But once the politics kick in, it'll all get buried again." "Maybe," I said, "but this time someone's digging." He stared at me for a long moment, then sighed. "For what it's worth, Carter, I never did think you fit the part." After that, I went back to my cell and sat on my bunk for hours, staring at the gray wall in front of me. I thought about all the birthdays I'd missed, the funerals, the years I'd lost waiting for someone to care. Maybe this wouldn't fix everything. Maybe nothing could. But for the first time since the cuffs closed on my wrists, I felt something like purpose. Then one afternoon, a guard came by with another envelope. "From Ortiz," he said. Inside was a single note written in her careful handwriting. "We found a file that was sealed after your conviction, a duplicate of the original evidence inventory. The signatures don't match. I think this is it." I read it 3 times, then folded it carefully and tucked it into my Bible. I couldn't stop shaking. That forgotten file, the one they'd hidden for decades, might be the key to my freedom. That night I sat awake long after lights out, listening to the low murmur of the prison around me. Somewhere far away, thunder rolled over Raleigh. The air smelled of rain, just like the night Emily had made that call. Only this time the storm felt different. This time it was mine. It was late afternoon when they called me into the warden's office. The air felt heavy, full of something I couldn't name. The guard at the door didn't meet my eyes as he said, "You've got a visitor." I assumed it was Detective Ortiz again. But when I walked in, it wasn't her. It was Paul Jenkins. For a second, I didn't even recognize him. He looked smaller, thinner, his skin pale, his hair almost gone. Time hadn't been kind to him. He was sitting in a wheelchair, an oxygen tube tucked behind his ears, a nurse standing quietly by the door. I froze. My old business partner, the man who had stood in court 21 years ago and told the jury I'd stolen from him. He looked up at me, his voice hoarse. "Hey, Ben." My throat tightened. "Paul," he gave a weak smile. "You look better than I do." I didn't answer. I just stared at him, waiting for the reason he was there. Finally, he took a deep breath and said, "I heard they reopened your case. Detective Ortiz came to see me. I guess it's time I told the truth." The room went silent. Even the hum of the air conditioner seemed to stop. He coughed into his sleeve before continuing. "Back then, Patrick came to me, said if I testified against you, I'd get immunity. Said you'd already confessed that it was just paperwork. I didn't believe him at first, but he offered me money, Ben, more than I'd ever seen. And I was desperate. My business was failing. I told myself it was just business." My hands clenched at my sides. I wanted to be angry. God, I wanted to scream, but all I could feel was this deep, hollow ache. Paul's eyes filled with tears. They forged everything. Patrick and Emily. The documents, the transfers, even the fake company records. I helped them bury you. I thought I'd live with it, but it's been eating me alive for 20 years. He reached into a folder on his lap and pulled out a thin stack of papers. "This is my statement, signed, sworn. I've given it to the detective, too. It's all here, Ben, everything I did." "Everything they did," my voice came out as a whisper. "Why now?" He looked down at his trembling hands. "Because I'm dying. Lung cancer. Stage 4. I don't want to leave this world with your blood on my conscience." For a moment I couldn't breathe. I just stood there, staring at the man who had destroyed my life, and was now handing it back to me piece by piece. When I finally spoke, my voice cracked. "You could have told the truth back then." "I know," he said softly. "And I'll never forgive myself for waiting this long." He wiped his eyes and gave a small, broken laugh. "Emily told me you'd never last more than 5 years inside. Guess she underestimated you." At the sound of her name, something cold and sharp ran through me. "Where is she?" I asked. Paul hesitated. "Virginia. She's still in real estate. Still using your name on some of the deeds. She and Patrick fell out years ago, but she's done well for herself." "Of course she has," I muttered. He coughed again, this time harder, until the nurse stepped forward to steady him. He waved her off. "I don't expect you to forgive me, Ben, but I needed to see you." "I needed to say it to your face." I looked at him for a long moment. Then I nodded slowly. "You just did." He lowered his head, a tear sliding down his cheek. "I'm sorry." When they wheeled him out, I stood there for a while, staring at the empty chair he'd left behind. The anger I'd carried for so long began to crack, giving way to something else, not forgiveness, but exhaustion. That night, Ortiz came to see me. She looked different, excited, almost radiant. "His confession changes everything," she said. "We have his written statement, the forged documents, the matching bank timestamps. We're filing for an emergency retrial." I just sat there staring at her, not trusting my voice. "Ben," she said gently, "this is it. We can prove you were framed." The words hit me like thunder. After 22 years, someone finally said them out loud. 2 weeks later, the courtroom looked different than I remembered. New faces, new judge, same cold wooden benches. I sat there in a clean shirt the warden had given me, listening as Ortiz and her team presented everything. The forged signatures, the manipulated timestamps, the bank statements that had never existed, and finally, Paul's confession. When they played the recorded deposition, Paul's voice echoed through the courtroom. "I lied. Benjamin Carter never stole anything. I did it because I was paid to. And I can't die without telling the truth." I watched the judge's expression shift, the weight of 22 years settling into that room. When the session ended, the judge said only one thing: "We will reconvene next week for the ruling." That night, back in my cell, I sat in the dark, listening to the rain on the roof. I thought of Emily. I wondered if she knew the truth was finally coming for her. For the first time, I wasn't angry. I wasn't afraid. I just felt still. Whatever came next, it was already in motion. The morning they told me I was free, I didn't believe them. The guard stood outside my cell, keys jingling in his hand, his voice flat as ever. "Carter, pack up! You're getting out today." For a second, I just stared at him. The words didn't fit. Getting out? That phrase had lost all meaning years ago. I looked around at the cell. The metal bunk, the cracks in the wall I'd memorized, the Bible with the letter from my son still tucked inside. Freedom felt like something that belonged to someone else. "Come on," the guard said. "Don't make me repeat it." I folded the letter one last time, slid it into my pocket and stood up. My legs felt weak, like they'd forgotten how to hold me. As I walked down the hallway, men called out from their cells. "Hey, old man Ben, you finally made it. Don't forget us when you're out there." Their laughter echoed behind me, but it wasn't cruel. It was a strange kind of respect. At processing, they handed me a plastic bag with the things I'd come in with, a wallet with no money, a wristwatch that no longer worked, and my wedding ring. I turned it over in my palm for a long time, before slipping it into my pocket. It didn't feel like mine anymore. The gates opened with a loud buzz. For the first time in 22 years, I felt sunlight on my face without bars in front of it. It was bright, too bright. The air smelled like rain on pavement, like something clean. My eyes burned. Outside the fence stood Detective Leah Ortiz and Reverend Grady. She smiled when she saw me, and he raised his hand in quiet blessing. "Welcome home, Ben," the Reverend said. His voice broke a little. I nodded, but I couldn't answer. The world felt too big, too loud. Cars honking, people walking, the sky stretching farther than I remembered. It was overwhelming, like waking from a coma. Ortiz handed me a folder. "These are the documents clearing your record. The charges have been vacated. You're a free man." "Free," I repeated, tasting the word like something foreign. She hesitated, then added softly, "There's something else you should know. Emily's been living in Virginia. She's done well, new house, new business, but the property she lives in, the mansion she built, it's still in your name. The one she bought through your old company before she framed you." For a moment I couldn't breathe. "My name?" Ortiz nodded. "Technically, it was never transferred properly. It's legally yours. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. After everything she'd taken, my children, my life, my years, the one thing she built from the ashes of my name still belonged to me." Reverend Grady put a hand on my shoulder. "The Lord works in strange ways, Ben." We drove back to Raleigh in silence. The city looked different, taller, faster. I watched people through the window, laughing, rushing, living, and I felt like a ghost passing through their world. Ortiz dropped me off at a small motel near the edge of town. "The state arranged temporary housing," she said. "We'll work on getting your compensation. It won't bring back the years, but—" "I know," I said. She paused before leaving. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry it took so long." I smiled faintly. "You were right on time." That night I sat on the edge of the motel bed, staring at the key in my hand, the key to the house I hadn't seen since the day they took me away. I still didn't know what I'd do with it. Sell it, burn it, walk through it one last time? I didn't know I turned on the TV. News channels were running the story. My face, younger and angrier, flashed across the screen beside the headline. "Benjamin Carter exonerated after 22 years. They played footage from the courthouse. Reporters shouting questions, people cheering, cameras flashing. I watched it all like a stranger watching someone else's life. Then they cut to a photo of Emily, older now but still beautiful, still polished. The caption read, "Former wife declines to comment." I turned off the TV. Outside, the rain had started again, soft against the window. The sound was almost comforting. I lay back on the bed, closed my eyes and let it wash over me. I was free, but freedom felt strange, like wearing someone else's skin. The next morning I drove out to Virginia. I didn't tell anyone. I just followed the directions Ortiz had given me, through winding roads lined with autumn trees. When I saw the mansion, white stone, tall windows, a perfect garden, I stopped the car and just stared. It was beautiful, too beautiful. And it had my name written into its foundation. I sat there a long time watching the wind move through the trees. Somewhere inside that house, Emily was living the life she'd built with my ruin. But this time she didn't know I was the one watching. The mansion stood on top of a hill in Charlottesville, Virginia. White stone, glass windows that caught the morning sun like they were made of diamonds. It didn't look real, not after everything I'd seen. I parked across the street, turned off the engine, and just stared at it. That house. My house. The one Emily had bought through my company before she framed me. It was beautiful, yes, but all I could see were ghosts. Every brick, every column, every inch of it had been paid for with my years, my freedom, my life. For a long time I couldn't get out of the car. My hands were shaking against the steering wheel. I'd imagined this moment so many times, seeing her again, asking her why. But now that I was here, the words didn't come. The only thing I felt was an ache deep in my chest, a kind of tired anger that no longer had sharp edges. Finally, I opened the door and stepped out. The air smelled like wet leaves and fresh paint. The driveway was lined with trimmed hedges, everything immaculate. I walked slowly toward the house. My reflection stared back at me in the polished windows, older, grayer, almost unrecognizable. When the front door opened, it wasn't Emily who stepped out. It was a young woman, maybe in her 20s. Her voice was polite but cautious. "Can I help you, sir?" I swallowed hard. "I'm looking for Emily Green," she hesitated. "Mrs. Green doesn't really take visitors." "Are you a client?" "Something like that," I said. She frowned but nodded. "Wait here." She disappeared inside. I stood there in silence, listening to the soft hum of the fountain in the yard. It felt surreal, like being in a dream I'd had too many times to believe in anymore. Then I heard it, the sound of her voice. Faint at first, then closer. That same voice that once whispered my name like it meant something. "Ben?" I turned, and there she was, Emily, 22 years older, but still unmistakably her. The same posture, the same calm, collected face. But her eyes, they were different. They had a flicker of something I couldn't name. Maybe fear, maybe guilt. She froze in the doorway. You're out," I nodded. "They found out the truth." Her lips parted, but no words came. I took a slow step forward. "You framed me, Emily. You stole my life. And you built this," I said, gesturing to the house behind her. "Built it with my name." She looked down, arms crossed tight across her chest. "You don't understand, Ben. Things were complicated." "Complicated?" I said quietly. "You forged documents. You lied to the court. You made our kids believe I was a monster. That's not complicated. That's evil." Her jaw trembled, but she didn't cry. She never did. "I did what I had to do. You were going to take everything in the divorce." Patrick said, "Patrick's dead," I interrupted. "He died in a car accident 10 years ago." Her eyes flickered. "I didn't know." "No," I said. "You didn't care to know." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The silence between us was thicker than any prison wall. Then she said, almost in a whisper, "What do you want from me?" I took a deep breath. "Nothing," she frowned. "Then why are you here?" I looked up at the mansion again, its windows catching the sunlight like glass eyes. "To see what my life bought you," I said. "To see how well you lived with the pieces you stole." Emily's voice broke for the first time. "You think this is happiness? You think I haven't paid for it?" I studied her face. There were lines now, shadows where beauty used to live. She looked tired, worn down, haunted. For the first time in years, she looked human. "I lost everything too," she said softly. "Patrick betrayed me. The kids, they barely talk to me. I built this house, but it's empty, Ben. It's just walls and echoes. I wanted to hate her. I wanted to shout, to tell her she deserved every sleepless night. But looking at her now, I saw something worse than guilt. I saw regret. And I realized nothing I could say would hurt her more than what she'd already done to herself. "You were right about one thing," I said finally. "It's empty." Her eyes filled with tears. "What are you going to do now?" I turned to leave. "Live," I said quietly. "Something you stopped doing a long time ago." I walked back to my car without looking back. The wind rustled through the trees, and for a moment I thought I heard her sob. But I didn't turn around. I'd spent enough of my life in her shadow. As I drove away, I looked at the rearview mirror and saw the mansion growing smaller behind me, fading into the distance. My name might still be written on its deeds, but not on my soul. That house could stay hers, cold, hollow, perfect. I didn't need it anymore. Freedom came quietly. No celebration, no fireworks, no one waiting at the door. Just silence and an empty sky. I thought walking away from that mansion would feel like closure, like the end of something. But as the road stretched ahead, I realized endings don't exist for men like me. We just keep walking, carrying the weight of years that no one can give back. I drove for hours without knowing where I was going. The sun dipped behind the hills, painting the sky in gold and red. I stopped at a small diner off the highway, the kind of place that hadn't changed in 50 years. The waitress called me Hon and poured me coffee without asking. It was the first real coffee I'd had in decades, and the smell alone almost made me cry. I sat there watching the cars go by, wondering how many people inside them were heading home, how many still had a home to go to. I had none. Martha was gone. My kids were grown, strangers to me. Emily was a ghost still living inside my memories. I was free, yes, but freedom, I learned, is just another kind of prison when you have nowhere to belong. I spent a few days at a small rental apartment the state had arranged for me. The walls were white, bare, the air too still. The bed was soft, but I couldn't sleep. My body was used to hard surfaces, to the hum of fluorescent lights, to the sound of metal clanging at dawn. The quiet was unbearable. On the third morning, there was a knock on the door. When I opened it, I froze. It was Nathan. My son. He stood there awkwardly, holding a paper bag in one hand. His hair was darker, his shoulders broader, but his eyes, those were the same. "Hi, Dad," he said softly. For a moment I couldn't speak. My throat closed up and I just nodded, afraid that if I said anything I'd fall apart. He stepped inside. "I saw the news," he said. "Detective Ortiz called me. She told me what really happened." I sat down slowly. "I didn't think you'd ever want to see me again." "I didn't," he said honestly. "For a long time I hated you. I believed everything she said. But when I saw your face on TV," he paused, shaking his head, "I saw the truth." "I'm sorry, Dad." Tears blurred my vision. I tried to find the right words, but all I managed was, "You don't need to be sorry." He sat across from me, and for the first time in decades we talked, not like a father and son, but like two men trying to rebuild something from ruins. He told me about Linda, now a teacher in Maryland, about how she still painted. "She's not ready to see you yet," he said, "but maybe one day." That was enough. Just knowing she was alive, that they'd both survived the lies, was more than I could have hoped for. When Nathan left that night, he hugged me before stepping out. It was brief, hesitant, but it was real. I stood at the door long after he'd gone, the smell of his aftershave still hanging in the air. Days turned into weeks. Slowly I began to build a life again, small, simple, quiet. I got a job at a hardware store downtown. The owner, a kind man named Larry, didn't ask questions. He just said, "You show up on time and we're good." That was all I needed. Some mornings I'd sit on a park bench with a cup of coffee and watch the sunrise. The light would spill over the trees, soft and golden, and I'd think about the years I spent watching nothing but walls. I thought about Martha's letters, about Reverend Grady's words, about Ortiz who refused to give up. And yes, I thought about Emily. I heard later that she sold the mansion and moved out of Virginia. No one knew where she went. Maybe she was running from her ghosts too. I didn't wish her harm. I didn't wish her anything at all. Sometimes I dream of the day I walked free. The sound of the gate opening, the first breath of open air, the sunlight too bright for my eyes. In those dreams I always look back one last time. Not at the prison, but at the life that ended there. I see the man I used to be standing behind the bars and I whisper to him, "You made it." But even now, with the world open and wide before me, freedom still feels strange. It's quiet. It's hollow. It's an empty room waiting to be filled. And yet, even in that emptiness, there's something beautiful. The sound of my own breath, steady and alive. After all the lies, the loss, the years of silence, I am still here. I am still breathing. If you like this story, please like this video. Subscribe to the channel and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left.